So welcome everyone to this month's View from the Mount. It's a live broadcast from Meditation Mount, and today we will be exploring the theme Heart-Centered Living and the Age of Revelation. So let's begin as we normally do by bringing ourselves present in the here and now. Bringing ourselves present to ourselves and to each other as we embark upon a journey of inquiring the way together. So let's do this by taking a few deep, gentle breaths and releasing any tension that may have accumulated in our physical body. Breathe out the tension and sense the relaxation. And now release any tensions held in the emotional or feeling body. The waters may be troubled, so with every breath allow the waves to subside so that what remains is a calm lake that clearly reflects the sky above. Then, as we breathe out, let us release any extraneous thoughts that may be swirling in our mind. Let these evaporate. Let these be blown away by the wind like clouds in the sky. So that our mind is clear and serene. And having relaxed and centered ourselves in these three bodies, let's step now into the silent, loving space of the heart and feel the pulse of life beating. And inside the sacred center of the self, we're aware of an eternal flame that burns. It burns at the core of our being. This is the fire of love, the essence of life. So from your heart to all hearts gathered on this call, let us link heart to heart to heart to heart. And in this way we weave together a receptive field in which new insights may flow. Thank you. So when I do these monthly View from the Mount broadcasts, I usually have a clear sense of this is the topic I want to speak on, and I have notes and I have things to do that would convey what I intend to portray. Today, my sense is of exploring what's happening in the world using some already conceived ideas, but just sharing in the moment what's moving, because these are unprecedented times. Things are moving rapidly, things are falling apart, and yet our task is to pay attention not just to what's falling apart, but what is seeking to emerge, because we are the agents of emergence. We may be living in times of emergency, but we're also living in times of emergence. And this is our role, to bring the new as we are witnessing the old fade away. That sounds slightly dramatic, but when you look around the world, it's pretty clear that what we're seeing is a major shift between two ages, between two states of being. So let me start with a few personal statements and observations. Once again, this is not the truth. This is what I feel in my heart, and I'd like to share with you. And I invite you also to ponder on, how are you standing? How are you perceiving what's happening in your life and the life of the world? How are you making sense of what's going on? So I believe that we're here on Earth to grow and flourish as vital and integral aspects inside the evolutionary scheme of a sentient being. And this sentient being we call planet Earth. And in the ancient text, the being is referred to the being in whom we live and move and have our being, which basically tells us that lives within lives, that we are alive within a greater life, which is part of a greater life. It's sort of this nested universe of lives. The other thing that I hope today in our exploration that we will be able to confirm and affirm that it is the courageous awakening of a loving heart that provides the necessary regenerative power for transformation and also provides the needed inner security and assurance during these times of testing and turmoil. Here in California, it's very difficult to get fire insurance now or flood insurance. So the question is, can you get a good life insurance? I've mentioned this before, but for me, purity of intent, doing what I'm called to do from deep within, and purity of heart, that's the only insurance policy that I can take out. Whatever happens to me as a result of what I do will be covered. So I'd like to put forward that what I sense, if you're going to go to the bottom line, is that at the fiery heart of everything, love burns. This fire of love that we tuned into just a moment ago. And without love, I don't believe a truly sustainable future is possible. And I want to explore more about what I mean by love. I'd like to also seek to understand two aspects of life: composition and decomposition, destruction, creation. And as a gardener, I know that composition, or the creation and emergence of new plants and a new season of flowering, always live as neighbors. So you've got the breaking down of forms and you've got the arising of new forms in the same garden. So I believe these two neighbors comprise the regenerative cycle. So the enriching of the soil through the composting and the death of outworn forms, and then this richness that goes into the earth supports the emergence of new green shoots, which are destined to grow and reveal an even more expanded expression of our essential nature. So what comes next season, hopefully, is a wiser and more creative expression of who we are. So we're being called to be soul gardeners on earth during some very extreme weather conditions. So I invite us to step into this journey and to dare to sow these hope-filled seeds of the future and the present, because at the moment I find the world to be somewhat deafening. There's a din and a widespread confusion filling the ethers as an old era passes away and a new is taking its place. And in between these two, there's always a great churning. So I'd like to start by quoting a verse by William Butler Yeats from his poem, The Second Coming, because I believe it gives voice to the concerns of a world that no longer appears to be coherent and cohesive. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. The ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Now that sounds pretty dark, but those words were written in 1919 after the brutal 4 years of the First World War. And at that time, if you like, a new vision hadn't really shown up. There was no light on the horizon. And I believe that there is a similar sense that people have now of, where's the light? All I can see is the darkness. But to be honest, in our heart of hearts, we've always sensed that it will be an unwinnable race against time. I believe we have a deep inner knowing that the waves of change set in motion by our polarizing beliefs and our unrefined behaviors over the centuries would eventually create a psychological tsunami. I believe this tidal wave of consequences has now reached the shores of our daily life, and it's causing massive disruption and disruption. I call it a time of collective reckoning because our karmic chickens from the distant past have finally come home to roost. And as we said before in these broadcasts, karma is not a punishment. It's a coming to terms with the unlearned lessons. If I've done something unskillfully, I'm presented with an opportunity to become more skillful. So karma is the creating of an opportunity to get it right. So I believe we're being faced with an opportunity to make better choices about how we live together. I know many people around the world are wondering, is it too late to stem the tide and ward off the inevitable results of our choices made over countless decades? You can't avoid karma, but karma doesn't have to be heavy when you hold it as an act of grace, as an act of offering of a classroom in which we can learn to be more true to who we are. So I want to just take it from a couple of different perspectives. If I look at social media, there's a perspective I can get. It appears, when I look at the global media, it appears our society is in free fall and it's about to hit the rocks. Now let's explore this possible scenario just for the sake of scenario planning. If we do hit the rocks, I believe there could be three eventualities, and perhaps all three could be present and in play simultaneously. So depending on the degree of spiritual alignment acquired and embodied individually and collectively, I can imagine that if we were to hit the rocks, three things will happen. We will either bounce, bruise, or break. I say this somewhat tongue-in-cheek, and yet I sense an element of truth in this perspective. And I'd like to just show a slide on the screen so we can walk through this together and see what do I mean by bounce, bruise, and break. So here what I've written is the reason we would bounce is a result of our lives already having acquired buoyancy and an upward trajectory towards living spiritual values and embracing soul qualities. So we're headed on a different trajectory. Therefore, if we were to hit, we would more likely bounce. I mean, this is one way of looking at it. Secondly, we could bruise. Because although full of aspiration and a measure of goodwill, and although we're seeking to be of service, some of us still remain attached to insatiable material needs, what I call ever-hungry emotional patterns and less than flexible belief systems. Thus, a somewhat bumpy and bruising ride of personal purification, healing, and transformation is guaranteed to help us become liberated and to grow. I think this is key here to show that karma is this opportunity to grow. It's a time of personal purification, healing, and transformation. Because without that, we get stuck and nothing happens. Now, the third possibility is break. And this is whenever personal identity, security, and survival are tied up with the preservation of form life, be that of a physical, emotional, mental nature, and takes precedence over the liberation and free expression of the indwelling life, we unavoidably chain and anchor ourselves to the deep ocean of matter. And whenever we cling to the life raft of any outer temporal form for safety and security, it is inevitable that we will one day go down with the ship. Now, once again, I don't want to paint a dark picture, but I'm just saying when things happen, there's a major crisis, we can either bounce, either we have the buoyancy to rise above it and then be of service to those who are suffering. We get bruised and we pick ourselves up, we make ourselves forward. But if we're so tied up and identified with matter, we're going to break on the rocks. So that's just one possible way of looking at it. Now, if I was to take what I've just shared with you, those three stages, and go back to the ageless wisdom teaching, they also have three possibilities for what they call the effects of divine will upon form. And the reason I want to show you this next slide is because we're in the year 2025 when it says there is another release of divine will, the energy that we know as the energy of Shambhala. This is the will, the destiny. This is the note of purpose. And the note of purpose is the sustaining note, and it will always win through at some point. So what I want to do is to share with you the next slide and just walk you through what this would be. Here we are. See at the top here, we've got this tuning fork, and it's the closest I can come to describing, when you sound a note, it resonates, it vibrates. And I think all of us understand that a very powerful note can shape things. And when I sing a pure note, it resounds in, say, if I have a crystal bowl in front of me tuned to a certain frequency, if I sing that frequency purely, the bowl will start to sing by itself. So this is what the ageless wisdom says will happen when the new energy of divine will is released. And the reason it's released is twofold. One is to remove the old forms so that they can die, be recycled, and to clear a space for the new to enter. So here on the far left, the strengthening of new patterns is one effect. So if I am in resonance with life, if I brought myself to a place in my life where I'm willing to be of service to others for the good of the whole, quote unquote, then this note of divine will simply strengthen me, give me a greater capacity to be of service. If, as I've found myself many times, like the person in the middle, where I had this deep desire to be of service, but I hadn't really got my act together, I still got things to work through, to purify, to transform, then when that note hits, it will give me a deep purification. It's a very cathartic experience. It won't destroy me. It will shake me, it will purify me, and it will bring me to a point where I'm closer to that true note, that resonance. It will bring my life back to order. And that's what the note does. It calls matter to order. Now, here on the right, where there is no relationship with something higher, then those forms simply die because they serve their purpose. If a form does not have a connection with spirit, it can't be sustained. So if there's something in my life that no longer serves my soul, I may be just keeping it alive through sheer willpower or my habits, my patterns. But when I allow the note of purpose to sound in my life, it's a great purging. So I believe there are three effects on us individually and collectively. The note that's being sounded this year, which is really the planet. If you think of the planet as a sentient being, as I said earlier, I believe we're part of the evolutionary scheme of this great being called the planet Earth. And the planet Earth is evolving and it's taking its next step. And it's asking all of the cells of its body to up their game, to raise their frequency. And so the resounding of the note of purpose is a call to live at a higher frequency. And if we can do it, we're strengthened. If we're not quite there yet, it'll shake us until we get to a point where we can do it. And if we're disconnected from that, then the forms of our life will be destroyed because they no longer are useful. So I wanted to just show that because I believe that that's key. So when things in my life start falling apart, I look at how useful they were. Are they falling apart because they no longer serve? So the question is, do we possess the necessary skills, and is there sufficient time at hand to arrest or even slow down the rate of free fall and thus counter the downward trend driving us into the ground? Basically, do we have to hit the rocks? What we set in motion has consequences, but we can soften the blow by the way that we act now, by raising our consciousness, by changing the way we behave. It doesn't have to be as destructive. Destruction is there to clear away that which is no longer useful. It's not there as a punishment, is my understanding. So if I look around the world at the moment, I and we may not be able to mend the broken weather patterns that are causing all this extreme weather, but we do have it in our power to mend the fractured body of our human family, one broken relationship at a time, one heart at a time. Now, you could well believe that my words so far sound like the foreword to a survivalist handbook, but I can assure you this is not the case. Because in addition to addressing the obvious need to survive the chaos of transitory times, the primary intent I have today is to offer a hope-filled statement of encouragement for us to create something new together, to issue a reminder of the compelling call to thrive and revive that constantly resounds at the very core of our being. So when we respond to the call of life, the call of the soul, it is to create the new. And I'd like to give here a spoiler alert. You often see that, so you don't know what the result is if you're going to watch a game. Spoiler alert. So here's the spoiler alert. The kingdom of heaven is within. I mean, that's it. I'm just giving you the answer. The kingdom of his heaven is within. So what do I mean by that? I believe that we carry the sacred seeds of the future in our heart. They're safeguarded at the deepest core of our being. And like a lotus flower, the future is waiting to be revealed one petal at a time. Now we know that the lotus has its roots in the mud at the bottom of the lake. And then the stem rises through the waters and pushes into the air because the lotus forms its bud in the air. And then the bud is exposed to the light. And when the bud faces the sun and is bathed in this solar power, it begins to open and begins to reveal the full flowering of the original promise contained in its own secret heart. The reason I use that image is because in a similar fashion, I believe each of us are seeds planted in the earth garden. We're planted in time, space, and substance, and we go through a similar process of the seasons, a similar process of growth. We go through rounds of incarnations, and gradually we grow out of the dark womb of matter into the light of day to flower and to reveal what the Greeks would call the Holy Trinity, truth, goodness, and beauty, which is contained in the original seed atom of our essential nature as a species. That's my understanding. Truth, goodness, and beauty lies at the heart of what humanity is, and our job is to reveal that. And I'd like to get to the whole process of revelation in a moment. So here we are in the Garden of Gaia. But at the moment, all is not quiet in the garden. We are witnessing the raging of major global storms with a great churning of the waters, a shaking of the earth, swiftly moving and unbridled conflagrations in the form of wildfires, as we've seen here in Southern California, and severe buffeting by wild and ferocious winds of change. I would say that we are witnessing a convulsion of the elements, and it occurs as one season passes and another takes its place. It's like between winter and spring, or spring and summer. There's always unstable air. There's always some churning in the atmosphere. So there is churning in the psychic atmosphere at the moment. So this is the nature of our present times. And we're called by life to be soul gardeners of Gaia in these extreme weather conditions, as I mentioned earlier. However, we can view this turbulent period as an opportune season for tilling the soil, turning the earth, preparing for the sowing of new seeds. And that's why we perceive these two aspects of life, composition and decomposition, living side by side as neighbors in the same garden. As I mentioned just a moment ago, I see these two aspects of the regenerative cycle representing the way that the soil is enriched in order to support the growth of the new seeds. And both happen simultaneously. Now, this is most clearly seen if you've ever been in a natural old growth forest. When you enter an old growth forest, you witness all stages of the life cycle simultaneously. You look around and you can see some trees that are dying, other trees that have fallen down, that have become so-called nurse logs, and new growth is coming out of their decomposing nature, providing the food for new. You see new shoots growing. You see the whole life cycle present at once. Most people have not witnessed life and death together as natural neighbors in an ecosystem. Most people, when they go to a wooded area, are really walking through what I would say are tree plantations, where you've got the same species, same age, nothing wrong with that, but they were grown as a crop. This is not the magnificent entangled complexity of a natural system. I believe we have to understand our lives as part of this natural system. And it contains both the death of old forms and the birth of new forms inside our own ecosystem. So what happens naturally in nature, I believe, is also taking place organically inside the ecosystem of our global community. So as a gardener, I worked a lot with compost piles and built compost bins. I love compost. What I loved about compost was that in the beginning, when it really starts to cook and get hot, it smells terrible, really sour, and it's all sticky. But when you've turned it and when it's been there for like 5, 6 months, when you put your hand into a compost bin, instead of this sticky, sour mess, you can feel this loose, sweet soil that's been produced. And so out of death comes sweetness. And that's always been an amazing reminder to me that composting is this process of putrefaction and just total recycling. So the reason I mention this is because what we're seeing at the moment on the planet are these two aspects of life. There's the natural cycle of death and rebirth, of chaos and of the creation of a new state of order out of that chaos. So that's natural. That's nothing to be afraid of. And until we understand that's how life works, we're going to be afraid of the dying of forms if we're attached to the forms. But what I'd like to put forward is that I'm not now talking about natural chaos, a natural state. I'm talking about an unnatural chaos that destroys and subverts that which is still useful and is being carried out by forces that seek to inhibit the natural evolution of consciousness and to inhibit the liberation of the spirit from the hold of matter. It's as though that this competition to get out of jail and those that want to keep us in jail. And there are aspects of ourselves that keep us bound to the earth. But I believe that we are in the middle of a time of unnatural chaos and disorder, as well as natural chaos and the emergence of new order. And it's difficult sometimes to know the difference. But as I say, I believe there are willful and calculated acts being done that undermine the birth of the destined promise of our humanity. So what do we do about it? Well, we respond to the call of life. And as I read the Agni Yoga teachings, I realize, if I distill what they say, is the greatest antidote to chaos is beauty. Because beauty is the harmony of life expressed in form. It's the sacred geometry of truth fashioned by love. So no matter what opposition we may face, no matter what chaos is in front of us, our task is to sow the seeds of the new in the now. It's basically to boldly birth the future in the present. So we bring order out of chaos. Not a regimented order, but the emergence of a new order that can express the beauty. Once again, truth, goodness, and beauty live at the heart of everything. So the question is, what will make the real difference and help turn things around? So here at Meditation Mount, we firmly believe there's a tipping point that happens when we shift our focus and locus of living from investing our energy in the dominance and survival of the separated self, like Michael is the center of the universe, and we make the needed reinvestment of life energy to support and serve the good of the whole. So let me show another slide here. So this is what we've been referred to, these two aspects of life. In the continuous pageant of life, through the cyclical procession of the seasons, the angel of endings, or the angel of death, always precedes the spirit of regeneration, so that truth, goodness, and beauty may be born anew and more radiantly revealed at every turn of the spiral. Appearance, disappearance, reappearance, such is the generative nature of emergence. So things come and go. The spirit persists. So if I'm attached to forms, I will die with the forms, or my sense of identity will die with the forms. If I'm centered within to the true self, the sovereign self, that's undying. And the forms of its expression will pass away and new ones. And I can welcome them. I can release those and have a sort of a wake to celebrate the passing of old forms, and a birthday party to celebrate the new forms. Here's a picture I drew many years ago, probably about 50 years ago, to show that at the deeper level, the causal level, that which causes life to happen, when it enters time, space, and substance, it enters through the portal of life. And I call this a white hole, because we know that a black hole, those of us who've read science fiction or who've read science know that a black hole is this amazing phenomenon that actually sucks light into it, and the light disappears to God knows where and God knows when. Well, if there's a black hole, there must be a white hole. So what I'd like to put forward, the white hole is the portal of birth into time and space and substance. It's where our soul, it's where our spirit brings itself through into form. And it grows, it goes through the cycle. And then it flowers, and then it dies and goes back through the portal of death. And as you can see, it's like a figure of eight. This is the infinity symbol. So light and dark, death and rebirth is the breathing of creation. It's the rhythm of creation. So now we get back to the tipping point that I mentioned. What could make a real difference and help turn things around? This is another format of what I just said. I firmly believe there is a tipping point that occurs when the locus of living shifts from investing energy solely in the survival of the separated self, and we make the needed reinvestment of life energy in serving and supporting the common good. Without this shift from egocentric to ecocentric living, we will continue to function as self-centered units competing with each other for resources and fail to realize that our Earth is an interdependent and sentient system of lives, a multidimensional and benevolent ecosystem of which we are vital and integral aspects. Now, this for me is the key. When I understand that we are part of something greater and that I don't have to be self-centered to have my needs met. If you go back to the ageless wisdom teaching, particularly the lineage that we follow here from the Master DK that has been outlined in the books by Alice Bailey, he said that service is the greatest healer and teacher. So when we give of ourselves to something greater, we nourish the whole, and then the whole is nourished, and by its nature, it nourishes, nurtures, and sustains its constituent parts, of which we are one. But if I'm just focused on self, then I'm out trying to get everything for myself and bring it on home like hunter-gatherer. But if I'm in service to life, life serves itself, and I'm part of that greater life. So that's how I see the present times. This is not a time to hunker down. This is a time to show up. So what I just shared about the tipping point and the power to change things, it's more than a belief. It's a shared knowing that here at Meditation Mount is founded on a deep understanding and appreciation over many years of the power of creative thought. Through the work that we've done with creative meditation, we've witnessed that everything is created from the inside out because energy follows thought. And when energy follows thought, any potent inner dream that is held and charged and magnetically charged will eventually precipitate into a tangible form. And I'd like to quote from Meister Eckhart. He said, "The outward work can never be small if the inward one is great. And the outward work can never be great if the inward is small." So it's how we hold ourselves, how we focus our thoughts, how we focus the compassion of our heart, how we project ourselves into the world. And what we project is our giving, rather than projecting images of who we would like to be seen as. That's the projection of the self. We're talking about the projection of seeds of the future. So contained in the title of today's exploration is the word revelation, that we're living in an age of revelation. So what does that mean? For me, revelation implies that something already exists and simply needs to be revealed. There's a deep aspect of life present inside of me, inside of you, that needs to be unveiled. So it's not a search outside of ourselves. We don't have to go on a quest over thousands and thousands of miles to find who we are. We have to unveil the truth of who we are. And the unveiling is the removing all that is currently blocking it. And that could be working on our physical health, working on our emotional well-being, our hang-ups, our prejudices, in the mental body. It's all that distorts and clouds the true sun of who we are, the light of who we are. So let's explore revelation. So as a gardener, I know that inside the carrot seed is always the promise of the carrot. It's a fact. However, if I just walk around and with a carrot seed in my hand and say, look at this carrot, you're going to say, I don't see a carrot, because at the present there's no visible proof. And then if I were to take a knife and cut open the seed, there's no miniature carrot sleeping inside that I can show you to prove my point. The only way I can prove the fact that the carrot is inside the carrot seed, the only way it can be shown is by being sown and grown in the fields of time and space and substance. This is nature's way of revealing. This is the natural act of revelation. Likewise, I believe at the heart of our essential nature is the promise of our true identity waiting to be revealed. It is a fact. The truth of who we are is not some wishful future. It's a fact. But it has to be shown. And we do this day by day in the incarnational soil of a lifetime. And we do it by cultivating the right inner and outer conditions, and by utilizing spiritual practices that quicken the seed and cause it to grow and flower, and thus reveal on the outside the promise that has always lived on the inside as a reality. So when people have lost hope and they don't believe there's any future, what they've done is fail to realize that the hope springs eternal. There is always hope, but hope can only be revealed when the conditions are right for its revelation. Therefore, it's important that we cultivate kindness. We cultivate, as the Buddhists say, metta, loving kindness, because this is the soil in which the seeds of sovereign self grow. So as we mentioned earlier, these seeds are carried and safeguarded in the chalice of our heart. Therefore, the first act is to open the heart and to access the promise of who we are, and then to dare to plant these divine seeds in the soil of daily living. We can't walk around keeping them safe in the packet. I know I've been to visit people, I won't say where and who, where they still have the plastic protective covers on their furniture. And I'm thinking, well, why? We can't keep our seeds in the package. We got to bring them out and sow them. So this is what it means to be a soul gardener. This is what it means to partake wholeheartedly in the spiral journey of evolution and revelation inside the Garden of Gaia. If you use that analogy of the seeds growing in the soil, of us as souls growing in the incarnational field, then we don't fear death. We don't fear the sowing. We don't fear the flowering. And we don't fear the harvesting and the decomposing of the form that revealed the truth, because there will be another turn of the spiral. So one way of marking our progress on the spiral path of evolution is to understand the nature of the transition from one level of awareness to another and greater level of conscious living. And so I'd like to show the final two slides and just walk you through the words. The evolution of consciousness occurs naturally through a progressive revelation and entry into greater states of wholeness, identity, and embodiment. By surrendering to and embracing this continuous process of disidentification, re-identification, and renewal, we experience an expanded sense of self. As the illusion of separation dissolves, it reveals the divine intimacy and interdependency of life, that great mystery in which we live and move and have our being. And at this point, there arises a deep knowing in our blood and bones, that in essence, we are fractals of the one life, that we carry the seeds of continuous creation within us, and we are the agents of continuous creation. We are the seed bearers, and it's up to us to plant ourselves in time and space. So, what is this transition from one level of consciousness to another? We've talked about the transition from the age of Pisces to Aquarius and all the things that that causes. We talked about the transition from Kali Yuga, which is in the Vedic tradition the dark age, to Satya Yuga, which is the golden age, which is awaiting us. And in the moment between these two ages, you get this great atmospheric churning. But I believe there's another way of describing another step for us as humanity. And I've summed it up as the move from simply existing as a human being to living fully as a Gaian. So let me explore and share what I mean by that. On becoming Gaian. So, what's the difference between living as a human and living as a Gaian? As humans, we go about our lives looking at the world as an external reality, something existing outside of ourselves. As a Gaian, we think, feel, and act within a deeply sensed knowing that the whole earth lives inside of us and that we live inside the whole earth. A Gaian is a conscious fractal of the multidimensional ecosystem that constitutes the living planet. A Gaian is a microcosm of Gaia, a sacred space of synthesis where life meets life and knows itself to be at one with all. And for me, this is the bottom line. This last sentence here sums it all up. What is the difference? A human being lives on the earth, while a Gaian lives as the earth. So a human being lives on the earth, but a Gaian lives as the earth, as the whole planet. We act as the sentient being of which we are an integral aspect. And I can just speak for myself, and this awareness came out of many years of gardening, many years of study, many years of meditation. It came down to this very simple thing. The next level of expansion for me isn't Michael living on earth, it's Michael living as the earth. And that just like, whoa, just a minute. I'm still growing into that awareness and what that really means. But when we represent the wholeness of life, there is no way we can harm anything inside that wholeness, which is really what compassion looks like in action. So we're sort of drawing to a close now, but let me offer some final thoughts. There are groups of citizens around the world who are seeking to live as Gaians. They're working hard to live in harmony with each other and with the whole ecosystem of Gaia in order to create a society that is truly coherent and sustainable. Many people are busy exploring what sustainability means in practical terms, from recycling, harnessing solar power, and reducing carbon footprints, to cultivating plant-based proteins, employing earth-friendly farming methods, and by strengthening our sense of community. However, I believe there's one element often overlooked by this pioneering movement because it's invisible to the naked eye, but thankfully not to the caring heart. We are talking again of the power of love. Love is the most powerful sustaining force in the universe. And according to the Asia's wisdom teaching, it's the pre-existing and prime motivating force behind all creation. So love burns at the fiery heart of the coming civilization. And without love, a truly sustainable future is not possible. If love were to stop her singing, the world would surely cease to exist. So our clear task in the coming months and years for each of us to cultivate an open and radiant heart wherein this inextinguishable flame of the fire of love may burn ever more brightly. And as was stated at the beginning of our broadcast, it is the courageous awakening of this loving heart which provides the necessary regenerative power for change and offers the needed inner security and assurance during these testing times of turmoil and transition. This is the key to heart-centered living. Heart-centered living is not sentimental living. Heart-centered living is living a life that's connected with all lives, because lives can be seen as a great chain of hearts. So let's take a breath or two here. There's a lot to cover, and I wasn't sure how much to cover today. My sense is that that's probably enough food to place in front of us. Once we make that shift, that tipping point from self-centeredness, egocentric, to ecocentric, the good of the whole, choosing to serve the good of the whole is a benevolent, heart-centered act of will. And it will place our wayward society and our straying feet as humans firmly back on the path towards health and wholeness, where the part does not exploit the whole, but the part adds to the well-being of all. So simply stated, the saving force needed right now in the world is loving kindness, unconditional cooperation amongst humans, amongst all beings, and joyful daring, a daring to do what life is asking us to do, is to come alive. So we are in this amazing period where one era is passing away and a new one is taking its place. And it's vital to our survival and to our future thrival as a species and as a planet that this fiery and loving heart is a fully functioning force for good. Because love needs to act as the guiding and governing force on earth. And I'd like to bring our exploration to a close by reading a verse from Christopher Fry's A Sleep of Prisoners. I'll read it twice. Thank God our time is now when wrong comes up to face us everywhere, never to lead us until we take the longest stride of soul we ever took. Affairs are now soul-size. The enterprise is exploration into God. Where are you making for? It takes so many thousands of years to wake, but will you wake for pity's sake? So let's allow that to sink in again. This is Christopher Fry, A Sleep of Prisoners. Thank God our time is now, when wrong comes up to face us everywhere, never to leave us till we take the longest stride of soul we ever took. Affairs are now soul-size. The enterprise is exploration into God. Where are you making for? It takes so many thousand years to wake, but will you wake for pity's sake? So that seems like a cry from the heart, the cri de coeur from our humanity. And it's my earnest desire of myself and all of us that we stir from our slumber, that we're able to respond to the urgent inner call for heart-centered living, that we're able to play our destined part with joyful resolve, that we can be part of this continuously evolving planetary project of renewal and revelation, and that we are mindful of the power that we have, so that all that we think, say, and do creates goodness, and that we do everything in service of the whole, and that we ensure that the tendency towards selfishness and towards the lure of the love of power be swiftly replaced by the power of love. For I believe that love and kindness are the prevailing qualities and characteristics of a heart-centered society. So thank you for your presence and for your participation today on this journey. There's some challenging years ahead, but let's see them as times of emergence, not just as an emergency. So thank you again, and on behalf of the stewardship team here at Meditation Mount, I bid you good night and bid you farewell from the Ojai Valley in Southern California. Namaste.